Good morning. The subcommittee will come to order. I want to begin by welcoming everyone here this morning, and I look forward to hearing from both panels here today. Today, the subcommittee will conduct an oversight hearing entitled The Role of the State Approving Agencies in Ensuring Quality Education Programs for Veterans. The State Approving Agencies, or SAAs, are VA's vital frontline partners in ensuring that veterans receive the quality education and training that they deserve. The SAAs have a long history of serving veterans dating back to when they were first created by Congress as part of the original GI Bill in the Veterans Readjustment Act of 1944. Although the education system has evolved over the last 70-plus years, the need and function of the SAAs has not diminished. It is important that with the billions of dollars spent on GI Bill benefits annually, that there is proper oversight over education and training programs so that veterans are enrolled in quality programs that fit their needs. Today, the need for correct and thorough oversight is more necessary than ever with the plethora of different programs available to veterans. There are now more schools, many of which have multiple campuses spread across the country. There are more training programs and options such as distance learning to access an extensive list of different programs. Furthermore, online education is becoming a more attractive option for veterans, and many fully accredited institutions have a majority of their students participating through online courses. With all of the different avenues of education now available, I believe that today's conversation is very important if we want to remain confident in the fact that we are doing everything we can to get veterans into programs that will be meaningful and useful to them for their future success. I want to take a minute to commend the current leadership at both the VA and the National Association of State Approving Agencies for their efforts in the past few years to work more collaboratively on their shared mission. This partnership, along with the input and assistance from other stakeholders, such as the Veteran Service Organizations, the National Association of Veterans Program Administrators, and many others, is what assures us all that veterans are getting the quality instruction they deserve from institutions that have the veterans' best interest in mind. With the increased level of benefits under the post-9/11 GI Bill over the years, and the passage of the in-state provision and expanded FRI scholarship benefits under the Veterans Choice and Accountability Act, as well as the growing popularity of non-degree and OJT apprenticeship programs, it is important that these partnerships not only continue to grow and that thorough oversight of education and training programs continue to be a focus. It is also important that as the education sector continues to evolve, oversight over these programs evolves along with it. I'm looking forward to discussing the legislative changes that the National Association of State Approving Agencies has proposed, as these proposals attempt to restructure the role and mission of the SAAs for decades to come. I hope that we can have a fruitful discussion on the proposal in the preparation for the subcommittee's legislative agenda in the 114th Congress. I also look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today on their view of the current state of higher education system as it relates to veterans' education benefits, as well as how they view the current structure, duties, and mission of the state approving agencies, and how we can work together to improve the effectiveness and ensure quality education for all student veterans. And I want to recognize our first panel. It is already seated. Today we have Mr. Ryan M. Gallucci, who is the Deputy Director of National Veteran Service for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Mr. William Hubbard, Vice President of Government Affairs for Student Veterans of America, Mr. Steve Gonzalez, Assistant Director of the National Veteran Employment and Education Division for the American Legion. I want to thank you for your past service and for your continuing service on behalf of our nation's veterans. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Keith Glendeman, Vice President, Legislative Chair for the National Association of Veterans Program Administrators. By the way, congratulations on your new position. We look forward to working with you. Thank all of you for being here this morning. Your complete written statements will become a part of the hearing record, and each of you will be recognized for 5 minutes for your oral statement. Let's begin with Mr. Gallucci. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the VFW, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the role that state approving agencies play in ensuring success for today's student veterans. We've made significant progress over the years to improve veteran access to education, not just by commissioning quality benefit programs, but also by improving access to pre-enrollment counseling and consumer resources, affording recourse to veterans who become victims of fraud, waste, and abuse, and most recently ensuring that no public school can hold a veteran's military service against them when determining eligibility for in-state tuition. The subcommittee and my fellow panelists should be proud of these accomplishments, but we're not done yet. Today's hearing and any resultant legislative changes should serve as a starting point for the broader discussion on the future role of the SAAs. Some in higher education insist that SAAs only duplicate the effort of accreditors and the Department of Education. The VFW refutes this notion because the scope of the SAA's responsibilities goes well beyond that of traditional higher ed. The VFW believes that we must periodically revisit oversight mechanisms and at times change roles and responsibilities to suit the needs of an ever-changing veterans community. And we encourage this committee to host future hearings to candidly discuss new and innovative ways to leverage a strong network of SAAs to foster quality outcomes for student veterans. The VFW proudly serves as a constructive partner with the National Association of State Approving Agencies as well as VA in ensuring student veterans have access to quality training programs. With this in mind, much of our testimony will focus on NASA's recommendations on ways to improve the effectiveness of SAAs. For the past few years, NASA has expressed frustration at the inability of SAAs to inspect and approve non-college degree programs at nonprofit schools, which were considered deemed approved through Public Law 111-377. After the law went into effect, the SAAs found that some schools started to develop NCD programs of questionable value. When SAAs sought to inspect these programs, they were denied access until VA intervened. However, SAAs still lack the statutory authority to properly approve NCD programs at nonprofit schools, meaning some programs continue to operate as deemed approved until SAAs learn about and inspect them. This is why the VFW supports extending statutory authority so SAAs can inspect NCDs to evaluate quality. NASA has also reported that public institutions of higher learning have started to commission flight training programs as free electives targeting veterans for enrollment. According to the SAAs, schools are adding such programs because of the uncapped reimbursement offered by VA through the post-9/11 GI Bill. The fact that these programs have sprouted up in the few years since the new benefit ramped up is a clear indication that SAAs must have greater authority to inspect and approve these programs. Moreover, the VFW agrees with NASA's recommendation to establish a reimbursement cap for flight programs commensurate with the private institution cap already established for the post-9/11 GI Bill. These new criteria are not an indictment of the quality of these new flight programs, but instead are a quality control measure to ensure that benefits are equitably administered for veterans who choose to enroll. Next, under current law, VA must conduct annual compliance surveys on all facilities with at least 300 student veterans enrolled. The VFW agrees with NASA's assertion that this is an impossible mission and one that neglects institutions that may face significant compliance issues. The current statutory requirement can mean that some schools will go years without a compliance survey as VA and the SAAs struggle to survey schools with large veteran populations. Such a requirement can hinder the response to at-risk programs that may enroll far fewer veterans while wasting significant time on inspecting perennial top performers. The VFW agrees with NASA that the statutory requirements should change to ensure that VA can conduct compliance surveys at all institutions at least once every 3 years. VA and the SAAs should also be given flexibility in determining priorities and conducting annual compliance surveys. In the past, this kind of collaboration may have been difficult, but thanks to the new GI Bill complaint system, the VFW is confident that VA and the SAAs have access to information through which they can identify trends and conduct risk-based reviews. Finally, after shopping around and speaking to school officials, the VFW could not identify a single preparatory course through which a veteran could use his or her GI Bill benefits. The ability to use benefits to prepare for complex entrance exams like the LSAT, GMAT, or GRE is a major selling point for veterans and a benefit readily discussed on VA's GI Bill FAQ. The VFW believes that the law is unclear about how these programs are to be treated for GI Bill approval, and we seek clarification on how VA should approve such courses so that veterans can take advantage of the opportunity. The VFW firmly believes that the SAAs remain a valuable partner in ensuring quality for veterans in higher education. We agree with many of NASA's recommendations. However, we also reiterate our call for periodic discussions on how to better leverage the SAAs to ensure veteran success in higher education. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, members of the subcommittee, this concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gallucci. Mr. Hubbard, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting Student Veterans of America to testify today. With this opportunity to discuss the state approving agencies and the National Association of State Approving Agencies, we will discuss their mission, effectiveness, and recent legislative proposal. With only 230 staff across 49 states, the SAA are responsible for over 7,000 facilities and more than 100,000 programs. This, in addition to over 1 million annual users of GI Bill benefits. Congress effectively established the SAA in 1945 when they passed Public Law 79-268, authorizing state governors to appoint their own approval agencies. As a mechanism to prevent so-called fly-by-night schools, from taking advantage of returning veterans, the SAA became the frontline defense to ensure that those veterans received a quality education. Recent changes to the role of the SAA has affected the allocation of finite resources, shifting them from areas where those resources are needed most. Then, in 2011, Public Law 111-377 impacted how the SAA are expected to operate. Responsibility for performing approvals was split to include the Secretary of VA, while the SAA were to increase their role in compliance measures. This shift in resources away from the significant duty to perform approvals has diverted specialized resources away from mission-critical functions. The SAA bring an implicit capability which should be given greater emphasis: the capacity for judicious discretion. For student veterans, the SAA across the country have the ability to call for a review of a school, even if no specific standards are triggered. The goal of the SAA, in our view, should be to have their success go unseen by the student veteran. If the SAA perform their job well, the true beneficiaries should remain unaware. Those that benefit from the due diligence of these professionals are the student veterans on campuses nationwide. Student veterans who successfully transition serve as a demonstration of the important work performed by the SAA, that these student veterans can count on receiving a quality education for the GI Bill benefits they earned. Indeed, they do not have to question whether or not their GI Bill benefits will be well spent, as the SAA provide necessary oversight to ensure their education will be one of quality. To further advance the effectiveness of the SAA, several things should be addressed regarding the authorities and resources. Despite the general effectiveness of the SAA, we believe that there are some areas that require attention. SVA agrees with NASA that the assumed approval of schools is risky for student veterans. Implicit approval is not always a safe assumption. Additionally, VA being included in the state approval process is also an issue worth reviewing. The responsibility is no longer the primary duty of the SAA. This authority should be returned to the SAA, given their subject matter expertise in the field. Lastly, we have serious concerns about the potential abuse of GI Bill benefits. While no specific cases have been yet addressed, the ability of schools to contract out certain programs for exorbitant fees is a serious issue. For some, flight programs or electives, the results of the government covering these costs of these programs is well beyond the market norm. With the intent of creating a clear and reasonable solution, SVA accepts the NASA proposal to reasonably cap such programs. Ultimately, we believe the approval process to be the preventative medicine for issues that would which would otherwise stem from low-quality programs underserving the interests of student veterans. SVA accepts the legislative proposal presented by NASA and encourages the body to empower the SAA to pursue their mission with the original intent of Congress. We thank the chairman, ranking member, and the subcommittee members for your time, attention, and devotion to the cause of veterans in higher education. As always, we welcome your feedback and questions, and we look forward to continuing to work with this subcommittee, the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, and the entire Congress to ensure the success of all generations of veterans through education. Thank you.
Mr. Hubbard, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Gonzalez, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. On behalf of the National Commander Mike Helm and the 2.4 million members of the American Legion, we thank you and your colleagues for the work you do in support of our service members, veterans, and their families. We thank you especially for holding this hearing. With the constantly shifting economic and social landscape faced by veterans, it is important to continually reevaluate, and if needed, revise the roles of the state-approving agencies in order to protect veterans and taxpayers. The American Legion is proud to work with the National Association of State-Approving Agencies in order to provide veterans with the best educational and training opportunities possible. In December 2010, Congress passed the Post-9/11 Veterans Educational Assistance Improvement Act of 2010, which was signed into law in January 2011. That bill contained language that impacted the role of the SAAs in terms of Program Approval Authority. Due to the expansion of the GI Bill, eligible programs to include many for-profit vocational training programs, non-registered apprenticeships, and on-the-job training establishments, the law deemed approved many programs that were otherwise accredited or approved by other institutions such as the Department of Education, recognized accrediting bodies. That was done in order to relieve some of the workload of the SAAs and to avoid redundancies between the work done by the SAAs and other accrediting bodies. While the American Legion applauds the expansion of the GI Bill applicability, we find it problematic that SAAs have been removed from a large portion of the approval process. SAAs focus explicitly on the GI Bill and serve to protect it, and by extension, the veterans using it. Furthermore, as federally authorized arms of their respective state governments, SAAs are in a unique position to evaluate programs that are offered in their state, given their proximity. This arrangement also maintains the federalism required by the Constitution. Therefore, the American Legion supports the SAAs and believes that they should have a role in the reviewing, evaluating, and approving all educational and training programs for GI Bill use. While some may argue that the work that the SAAs do is redundant to the work of accrediting bodies, the American Legion believes that the SAA's approval is in fact unique. This is because the charge of the SAAs is to specifically focus on protecting GI Bill funds, while traditional accreditation provided by the Department of Ed, recognized accrediting bodies, does a significant portion of work towards ensuring quality programs. SAA approval should work in tandem with that accreditation rather than the stark division that is represented in the current statute. However, in the current law, SAAs lack the statutory authority to inspect many questionable programs that have sprung up since the passage of the post-9/11 GI Bill at not-for-profit institutions. The American Legion supports the portion of the legislation proposed by the NASAA that would statutorily make SAAs the primary approving body for all programs approved for GI Bill use. Programs may still be deemed approved, but at the discretion of the SAAs, not the Secretary of VA. The American Legion agrees with the NASAA recommendations regarding changes to flight training. Not-for-profit institutions would take advantage of the GI Bill by charging exorbitant tuition and fees for this training is disheartening. Fixing this loophole helps to protect the GI Bill by ensuring that the costs are kept low, while still allowing beneficiaries to pursue such training if required or desired. Furthermore, in cases where the institution contracts with a third party to provide the training, the American Legion believes that the SAAs should still have approval authority. Additionally, the American Legion supports a proposed shift in the statutory requirement for SAA compliance surveys. As NASAA has indicated, the current mandate is needlessly burdensome and is frankly impossible given the limited resources available. In light of this, the American Legion believes that their funding should be increased to ensure that they are able to adequately perform their crucial role, even if SAA's compliance surveys requirement is reduced. An increased role as primary approving body seems likely to require the resources. The American Legion supports SAAs and recognizes the crucial role they play in ensuring quality programs for veterans using their GI Bill benefit. This hearing should serve as a starting point for an ongoing conversation regarding the role that SAAs currently play in quality assurance. How SAAs approvals interact with accreditation remains somewhat unclear. This legislation will make strides toward clarifying and codifying the terms of that interaction. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, we thank the subcommittee for looking into this issue and is crucial to veterans and look forward to your questions.
Mr. Gonzalez, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Glendeman, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, my name is Keith Glendeman. I'm the Vice President of the National Association of Veteran Program Administrators, NAVPA. I appreciate and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss NAVPA's view on the role of state approving agencies in ensuring quality education programs for veterans. I'm accompanied on this trip by Mark Barker, who is our current NAVPA President. It is my hope to help provide some insight on this topic from the viewpoint of the individuals that are charged to implement the policies and procedures on veterans' education benefits at our colleges and universities across this great nation. NAVPA was founded in 1975 and is a nationally recognized nonprofit organization of institutions and individuals who are involved in the operation of Veterans Affairs programs and/or the delivery of services to veterans as school certifying officials. We are devoted to promoting professional competency and efficiency through our association's membership and with others involved in veterans education assistance programs. We believe that the development, improvement, and extension of opportunities to any veteran or their dependent for their personal growth or development to be a noble cause. Relationship with the SAAs. NAVPA has worked hand in hand with our nation's state-approving agencies for many years. They've been instrumental in helping our organization provide our members with comprehensive training sessions at national and regional conferences, offering technical assistance with complex issues regarding the certification of GI Bill benefits, as well as providing subject matter expertise on policies and procedures. We as an organization have seen the state-approving agencies always assist in a timely manner. This is especially beneficial as it's often hard to get a quick response from our overburdened VA education liaison representatives. Compliance surveys. Current statutory requirements require that any institution with at least 300 GI Bill recipients have a compliance survey conducted annually. This requirement is mandated regardless of the results of the prior year's survey. This requirement results in overburdened inspectors revisiting schools that have proven to be good stewards and in full compliance. The negative effect of this requirement results in many smaller institutions with less than 300 GI Bill recipients to go years between surveys. This creates an inequity among schools where benefits are being applied. Within NAVPA, we have been told of institutions that have not had a compliance survey since the inception of the Chapter 33 post-9/11 GI Bill. By relooking at the 300 mandated inspection rule, a more favorable one could be determined that would allow institutions to be on more equal footing in regards to compliance surveys. This could also allow SAAs to be freed up to provide additional technical assistance and training. Potential compliance issues could be avoided by having better trained SCOs on the front end of the process. This would reduce issues of non-compliance and help to preserve benefits. Deemed approved. Section 203 of Public Law 111-377 deems certain programs of education to be approved for VA educational benefits. NAVPA's membership supports the current deemed approved language in 38 U.S.C. 3672 for accredited standard college degree programs offered at public or not-for-profit proprietary IHLs that are accredited by an agency or association recognized by the Secretary of Education. NAVPA respectfully asks the legislator and the Department of Veterans Affairs to clarify and define deemed approved relative to what the interpretation of a standard college degree program is. In the absence of a clear definition of standard college program, our member institutions are being inundated with proposals and requests from training programs to enter into third-party contracted training agreements so that the non-approved programs can operate under the umbrella of deemed improved. Standard college degree programs without actually going through the approval process, be it the VA or the SAA. In closing, NAVPA's membership institutions strive to always be in compliance with all regulations when assisting our students in utilizing their VA educational benefits. As an organization, NAVPA looks forward to a continued strong relationship with the state-approving agencies, the VA, and others charged with assisting our veterans in achieving their educational goals. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the committee, thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Glendeman, for your testimony, and I now yield, or I actually thank the panel for your testimony, and I now yield myself 5 minutes for questions. For each of you, and we'll start with you, Mr. Gallucci, what is your position on the SAA's proposed legislative changes to the GI Bill as it pertains to flight schools?
As we laid out in our testimony, we support establishing a cap and allowing SAAs broader authority to inspect these programs and evaluate them for quality. The reason we support establishing that cap is because what the SAAs have reported and what VA seems to have confirmed is that these schools seem to just be charging whatever they want. It's not commensurate with what the economy would reflect the cost of that program should be. So our concern is that they're basically optimized to what the post-9/11 GI Bill will pay out right now. Okay. And unless we get that under control, they're going to continue to charge exorbitant fees for that, which VA will have to reimburse for.
Okay. Mr. Hubbard?
Thank you for the question. Similarly, we support NASA's proposal, more from a standpoint of the concerns over waste of the GI Bill. As money goes out the door way beyond market norms, this is ultimately decreasing the return on investment with the GI Bill, which is of serious concern to us.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, Chairman. I will echo the same sentiment as my two colleagues. We support SAA's recommendation on flight school. Just like Will and Ryan has indicated, is also ensuring that we're fiscally responsible in how the GI Bill is being applied, what is the return on investment, and ensuring that the SAAs can actually review the actual programs that are being offered, regardless of where they're being offered.
Okay. Mr. Glendeman?
Thank you, Chairman Flores, for the question. Our position at NAVFA would be that we support the state approving agency's recommendation on this. Fee caps are necessary to help preserve the whole program as we look at the use of the post-9/11 GI Bill. The other piece would be that we need to ensure that people aren't taking flight classes in an open elective status and therefore bearing the benefit.
Okay. Well, thank you. Mr. Hubbard, throughout your written statement, you referred to your belief that the SAAs need to return to their core competency. Can you expand on that recommendation?
Yes, and thank you for the question. The SAAs, their original role as an approval body, has been somewhat mitigated by additional expectations placed on them, in particular, their performance of compliance measures. We believe compliance measures are more of an audit function and can be done in other entities. For them to take their subject matter expertise and place it towards activities that are not their core competency is ultimately denigrating their comparative advantage in the space.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Glendeman, one of the biggest challenges that arises when it comes to veterans education, as I understand it, is the high turnover rate and the need for enhanced training for school certifying officials. Can you comment on these issues? You touched on a little bit, and how we can work collaboratively to address the retention and turnover and training of these individuals.
Thank you. Yes, the main thing with our school certifying officials are that there often could be at a college where they wear many hats. They're not only a school certifying official, they could also be an admissions person, evaluations personnel. The other thing is that school certifying officials who only do that duty also may move within the structure of their college, therefore giving a high turnover. Currently, we have the school certifying official manual that the VA updates and puts out to us every 6 months, which is a great tool. It's approximately 280 pages. The quick reference guide for certifying VA benefits is 120 pages.
Wow.
Sometimes that could be like drinking from the fire hose when you're just trying to do that. The best types of training are physical, training where the people can actually be in front of the request. When being certified to be able to certify benefits, the VA1 system offers a training program prior to being able to enter stuff. That's a great first step. However, something more thorough and that could be offered whether regionally trained or SAAs actually in the schools would be beneficial.
Okay, so you believe there should be some sort of standardized training with a certification for this position at schools?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Kirkpatrick, we thank the first panel for your testimony. You're now excused, and I would invite the second panel to the table. On our second panel, we welcome back both Mr. Curtis L. Coy, Deputy Undersecretary for Economic Opportunity at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and he is accompanied by Major General Robert Worley, Director of the Education Service at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Thank both of you for your prior service, and it's nice to have you back in front of this committee. And we also have Dr. Joseph Westcott, President of the National Association of State Approving Agencies, who's been a large subject of the testimony at today's hearing. We thank you for your prior service as well, Dr. Westcott, and it's great to have you here. Mr. Coy, as soon as you get situated, we will recognize you for 5 minutes for your testimony. So, sorry to rush you guys.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Takano, and other members of the subcommittee. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Department of Veterans Affairs Education Benefit Program and the role of state approving agencies. Accompanying me this morning, as you indicated, is Rob Worley, our Director of Education Service at VA. I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking NASA for its leadership and all SAAs for their continuing commitment to work with their respective educational institutions and VA to ensure the accurate and timely delivery of high-quality educational benefits to our veterans. I would specifically like to thank Dr. Joe Westcott, President of NASA, for his exceptional leadership. The last several years have been a collaborative journey with our SAA partners. I would also like to thank and acknowledge the other members and organizations testifying here today. I respect and admire their passion and advocacy of veterans. As you know, VA administers educational benefits to eligible veterans and dependents, while SAAs work to ensure the quality of educational and vocational programs. SAAs are charged with approving courses, including apprenticeship programs, and ensure that education and training programs meet approval requirements through a variety of approval activities. With the implementation of Public Law 111-377, VA was given the authority to use the services of SAAs to assist VA in conducting compliance surveys. That has been an incredibly value-added partnership. SAAs also conduct outreach to veterans and other eligible persons about available education and training benefits. We believe SAAs add significant value to the VA's educational benefit programs. As I mentioned, in the past 2 or 3 years, VA and our SAA partners have worked collaboratively. 2 quick examples. This past September, VA and SAA and NASA conducted a joint summer training conference to provide essential training to both NASA and VA compliance and liaison staff. One primary goal of the training was to ensure a comprehensive and consistent understanding of all aspects of compliance surveys. Another example, VA and NASA recently chartered a joint advisory committee to serve as a standing forum for resolution of issues related to the mutual responsibilities of SAAs. Today we are here to talk about legislative proposals submitted to the committee by NASA in 3 broad areas: compliance reviews, flight training programs, and program approval. With respect to changing the current statutory requirements for conducting compliance surveys, VA believes it may be necessary to review the frequency and types of schools at which compliance surveys are conducted. Currently, there are about 16,000 approved domestic and international institutions of higher learning and non-college degree institutions. Of the 16,000, 11,260 were active institutions in calendar year 13. During the last 2 fiscal years, VA and SAAs have completed over 10,000 compliance surveys. This work was split roughly in half between VA and SAAs. VA believes that it would be valuable to review the criteria for compliance survey requirements, and we believe there should be enough flexibility to allow for the time and resources to conduct scheduled surveys as well as unscheduled surveys and risk-based surveys. We look forward to working with NASA and the committee on this. NASA also has put forward a proposed changes to flight school aspect of the GI Bill. Like NASA, VA is concerned about high tuition fee payments for enrollment in degree programs involving flight schools. VA wants to ensure that we are good stewards of the taxpayer money, and we are open to discussing possible changes in how benefits are paid. There has been a significant increase in flight training centers, specifically those that offer helicopter training, which have contracted with public IHLs to offer flight-related degrees. Sometimes these programs charge higher prices than those would have been charged if the student had chosen to attend a vocational flight program, which is currently capped at about $11,000. We are also concerned about the growing number of VA beneficiaries are taking flight school courses as an elective. Finally, NASA proposal would clarify and codify state approval authority and oversight to all non-federal facilities. VA is not opposed to this proposal and to clarify SAA approval authorities within the context of the other key functions SAAs perform, including compliance, training, outreach, and technical assistance. However, the VA believes that the Secretary should maintain the approval-related authorities currently reflected in the statute. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Coy. Dr. Westcott, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the subcommittee, I am pleased to appear before you today on behalf of the National Association of State Approving Agencies to discuss the role of state approving agencies in ensuring quality education. I am accompanied by our Legislative Director, Tim Freeman. Soon after the GI Bill became law, Congress, recognizing that it was the responsibility of the states within our federal system of government to oversee the education of their citizens, required that each state establish a state approving agency. Thus evolved a truly cooperative federal-state effort that maintains the rights of the states while monitoring and protecting a federally sponsored program administered under the terms and conditions of federal law. And I would say that VA has strived, particularly under the leadership of Deputy Undersecretary Kurt Coy, to both support and enhance that historic partnership. I sincerely thank him for that commitment. And I thank my other partners here today as well, who share both our passion and our purpose. Today, 55 SAAs in 49 states and Puerto Rico, composed of nearly 175 professional and support personnel, are supervising over 7,000 active facilities with approximately 100,000 programs. NASA believes strongly that the primary responsibility and focus of the SAAs is and should continue to be to review, evaluate, and approve programs at schools and training facilities utilizing state and federal criteria, and to provide training and technical assistance to school officials. For that reason, it is critically important, as Congress intended, that each state have a state approving agency. In 2011, with the implementation of Section 203 of Public Law 111-377, we began assisting VA with their requirement to perform compliance surveys at SAA-approved institutions. Over the course of the next 3 years, SAAs conducted over 60% of the compliance survey visits performed. Last year alone, we conducted 51% of those visits. NASA has submitted legislative proposals to the committee which would serve to improve the service and protection provided to our veterans while enhancing the administration of the GI Bill. Our legislative proposals to the committee are in the area of approval authority, payment for flight programs, and compliance reviews. NASA seeks to clarify and codify state approval authority and oversight over all non-federal facilities. We wish to clarify the Federal Code in regard to the role of SAAs by identifying SAAs as the primary entity responsible for approval, suspension, and withdrawal. In addition, since the passage of the Public Law 111-377, there's been no statutory authority for the approval of accredited NCD programs at public or private not-for-profit institutions, a situation our recommendation would correct. NASA is seeking measures to improve cost control for flight programs offered by colleges and universities. Some public higher education institutions have instituted higher costs for flight fees, and in some cases, benefits have been paid for aviation degree programs at public IHLs provided by a third-party flight contractor with no approval issued by the governing SAA. NASA suggests limiting Chapter 33 payments for flight programs at public institutions to the prevailing cap. Finally, NASA seeks appropriate changes to 38 U.S. 3693 to improve the manner in which we and our VA partners perform compliance surveys. We would like to see changes in the law to allow VA, with the assistance of the SAAs, to respond quickly to risk identified through the new complaint system. To accomplish this, Mr. Chairman, our legislative proposal to amend the law is to amend the law to provide that the Secretary will conduct a compliance survey at least once every 2 years at each facility offering one or more approved programs with at least 20 veterans or eligible persons enrolled. Mr. Chairman, NASA remains strongly committed to working closely with our VA partners, our VSO stakeholders, and school officials to ensure that veterans have access to quality educational programs delivered in an appropriate manner by reputable providers. This concludes my statement. and I look forward, Mr. Chairman, to answering any questions you or other members may have.
And Dr. Westcott, thank you for your testimony. Also, thank you for the work that you and your colleagues and your affiliated organizations do to further veterans education in our country. I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes for questioning. The first question is for you, Mr. Coy. What is the Department's position on the flight school changes that have been proposed by the SAAs?
Mr. Chairman, for that question. There's 2 or 3 comments with respect to flight schools. Right now, flight schools, as we break it down, are basically in 3 general areas. The first is the vocational flight school, and as I mentioned, that's currently capped at $11,500 and a little bit more. And we believe that's fine as is to some degree. The second is flight school programs at institutions of higher learning that for the most part have been contracted out, and we've seen an alarming increase in the dollars that are spent on that. And then finally, there are flight course electives that veterans are taking that, again, is somewhat alarming in that. Capping them at the current national maximum of $20,235.02 probably makes good sense in terms of being able to manage those programs and looking at this from the standpoint of being good stewards of the taxpayer money.
Okay. Thank you. Another question, Mr. Coy. What's the Department's position on the legislative changes proposed by the SAAs regarding the number of compliance surveys completed over the course of a year?
Another great question, sir, and I would suggest that as we stand back and look at compliance surveys as a whole, currently, as you know, it's all schools over 300 students. I have some numbers here that are somewhat interesting. Right now, as I think I mentioned, there are about 11,260 schools that are active schools, or excuse me, were active schools in 2013. Interestingly, of those 11,260 schools, 15% of them have 1 veteran attending. And then if you look overall, the number of schools that have 20 or more attending is 5,100 schools. So you see we would essentially capture well over 50% of those active schools should we drop that down to 20. We've also heard testimony today that there are some schools that don't necessarily are required to have compliance surveys because they drop below that 300 cap. So doing it for 20 schools or more probably is an appropriate number every 2 years because what we think would be valued is as we've stand back and looked at our compliance survey process in the past few years, as I mentioned, we've done 10,000 over the last 2 years or 15,000 in the last 3 years. And so if we stand back and look at being able to do, in round numbers, 5,000 surveys a year, and being able to schedule a certain amount of surveys, so the 20 schools over 20 would be, in round numbers, about 2,500 schools or so every 2 years. That allows us some flexibility to do unscheduled visits, which we want to increase, but as well do risk-based reviews of schools based upon whether they're complaints from our complaint system or getting them from other quarters. So the over 20 probably provides enough flexibility.
Okay. The next question is for both of you, Dr. Westcott and Mr. Coy. In Mr. Gallucci's testimony in his written statement, he alerted the subcommittee to the fact that many college prep courses offered it, or actually I'd say post-undergrad courses, are offered at institutions of higher learning are not approved for use under the GI Bill. Can you tell me, A, is the assertion correct, and B, if it is, do you see this as a problem, and what steps can the VA and the SAAs take to address this issue?
Mr. Chairman, certainly there is regulatory ability to approve those courses. There are certain limitations about what courses can be approved. For instance, they must be offered by an IHL. So normally what happens in the approval process, if a student takes a course, wants reimbursement, he will go to that institution, and then that institution would come to the SA. Certainly we can work within our states to promote more knowledge about these courses, and can work with IHLs to see what they're offering so that we can have more of those courses approved. But it's somewhat driven by the needs of the veterans themselves.
Mr. Coy, anything to add?
I would agree with Dr. Westcott. I'd add one or two other pieces. There is some flexibility to provide for some of those things like LSAT prep courses and SAT prep courses and that sort of thing for the GI Bill. I think one of the challenges that we see more anecdotally than not is remedial courses for veterans coming onto campus. And so when they first get to campus, they may require, for example, a no-credit course, but it's English 101 revised or revisited, in other words, or Math 101 that would help a veteran get reacquainted to the academic environment. Generally, those courses are not credit courses. So what you end up doing is for a veteran to be a full-time student, as an example, they would be required to take 12 credits. To be a full-time student, that would get them their housing allowance and so on and so forth. Well, for them to take the remedial courses, they would take those 12 credit courses, but then they'd also take the 0 credit, and it starts to overburden the veteran. So those are the kinds of things that I think Ryan was also alluding to in his oral testimony.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Coy. And I thank you, Mr. Coy, Major General Worley, and Dr. Westcott. You're now excused. I want to thank everyone for your attendance today and the frank discussion on the state approving agencies. And I appreciate, Dr. Westcott, the recommendations of your group, and I think they're very helpful. Finally, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material in the record of today's hearing. Hearing no objections, so ordered. If there is nothing further, this hearing is adjourned.